Hi, welcome back to Badass Women 50 Plus. I am Robin Lane, producer, director, psychotherapist. At my age of 86, having as my co-host a woman young enough to be my granddaughter and actually prettier than me being as vain as I am, just shows you what a badass I am. She is the actress, award-winning filmmaker, and comic creator Maria Secor.
Hi, I am Maria Secor, and everything Robin said about me, as you can see for yourselves, is perfectly true. But that's enough about me, at least for this moment.
Given the uncertainty of the times that we are living in, we decided to change our format by altering our 50-plus rule and focusing on change and adaptation. Change is inevitable, but how we adapt and grow, that's a choice. And to inspire you in that direction, we and our guests, all coming from different time zones, will share personal stories that we will follow up with the data that explains the universality of these personal stories. And we like to entertain, so don't be surprised when a thoughtful moment is followed up by a very zany image.
Let's focus on one of the traits in a badass woman's arsenal, which is her understanding of change. Being savvy, that change is the one constant she can count on. A badass always has a plan B. It doesn't matter if fate is the driving force or she the instigator of change. She makes it work in her favor. And in times like ours, that attribute is a necessity. Each of our guests, a badass woman in her own right, will share a personal story based on this subject. Some gals will be serious, others not so. We are thrilled to have amongst our guests both the magnificent Shakespearean actress Debra and Byrd, as well as the great singer Judy Scott.
The Second World War had ended. I was 12 and a half, and I caused a family conflict that bordered on combat. This has to be prefaced by explaining how conservative those early post-war years were. Change was not in the air. Every Monday, my mom made lamb chops. Every Tuesday, my mom made spaghetti, and nothing altered the routine. We were not ultra-Orthodox Jews, but we lived close to those rules. It was on a lamb chop night that the drama occurred. We had just sat down to dinner when I got up, took the water glass to the fridge, got out a bottle of milk, and poured a glass. My mother screamed. My father stood up from the table, and my kid sister trembled. Unfazed, I sat down and rapidly began to drink the milk before my mother could snatch it away. You see, Jews do not mix meat with milk. It is considered a sin. But I knew what I was doing. I had a plan. It was time to rebel. No dinner, but so what? My mother's cooking was nothing to crave. I refused to eat the next day and could have gone on like that forever. See, my aunt next door, she was a great cook, and she had lots and lots and lots of candy. And more than the wrath of God, my parents feared my possible starvation. And so I won this, the first of many rebellions to come. Now, at 86, and in isolation, and recently widowed, I'm still rocking it. I have always refused to ascribe to the playbook of others, which, truth be told, is in accordance with the mandate for Jews. Jews believe that not only do individuals have the ability to initiate change, but they have an obligation to do so. Think about this. The transformation of skeptical, wandering individuals into a sanctified, righteous community. Well, that is the story of the Jewish people, and it is a story of change. And the demand for social change, one of the most important aspects of Judaism, is the concrete way of understanding my people's relevance to life, because it gives us a clear purpose and a goal to try to make the world into what it should be. An outstanding example of these values is the late, great, beloved Ruth Bader Ginsburg. Change and adaptation, it's in the DNA of my people. So, if my mother's fury could not stay me, neither will any pandemic. And as the great John Lewis said, I will go on making the good kind of trouble.
While I was a student at Montclair State University, to make some extra money, I taught myself legal reading and writing and worked for 2 dynamo attorneys who, like myself, had a penchant for partying. They invited me to one of New Jersey's oldest events, the Walk to Washington. This was actually a train ride that started at New Jersey Penn Station, made a few stops along the way, and arrived in Washington, D.C., ending with a really cool dinner. When I learned that Senator Hillary Clinton was on board, my pulse began to race because she'd always been the woman I most admired. I was determined to meet her. As I made my way through the train, it led me to be within striking distance. Now my heart was pounding so hard, if it wasn't for the noise of the train, everyone would have heard it. When I found myself face to face with her and the moment arrived, instead of just asking her for an autograph, I blurted out that, like her, since childhood, I had been beyond fervent about women's rights. A man, obviously belonging to the Secret Service, moved towards me, but she discreetly moved him away. She asked, "How old were you when you became aware of these issues, and how come?" Then I'm practically telling her the story of my life, of being a person of mixed race and how that set me apart, leading to a heightened awareness of when people were being done wrong. She was so attentive, it emboldened me to say, "May I ask your opinion on a personal matter?" "My passion," I said, "is to make a documentary film about female trafficking." She sat quietly for a minute, me terrified that I bored her, then asked some questions. Within minutes, she reached into her bag, got out a card and a pen, and on the back wrote a note introducing me to a colleague of hers from Boston who eventually became my investor. That one of the world's most prominent women could have such an immediate faith in me, coupled with my own drive, marked the beginning of my filmmaking career and changed my life. During COVID, filmmaking, a collaborative medium, is a challenge, but it isn't going to keep me from my path. This disgracefully mismanaged pandemic, which BLM, amongst others, has stood up to, has only reinforced my sense of duty. Though as a woman and a minority, I am part of a marginalized group of filmmakers, I will continue to tell the stories of the countless other disenfranchised people in our nation. Not only that, during this crisis, I am a candidate running to be a township committee member, blue of course, in a red town. Ain't nothing gonna stop me.
As a mere 1.3 of all directors are people of color, and only 1 of every 10 directors is a woman, it's pretty obvious that neither an authentic minority voice or female perspective is commonly heard. And documentarians do not fare much better. Director Iyabo Boyd posted this plea: "Please don't hire more white filmmakers to tell the stories of this historic time, this pandemic, this protest movement, and the murders of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and Ahmaud Arbery. They deserve to be represented by filmmakers who are on a first-name basis with our country's system of oppression." There is a movement now for social justice, and with it, the realization that diversity cannot occur without women's voices and minorities needing a larger platform to tell their stories and to tell them on their own terms. So hats off to Maria Secor, to her peers, and let us support them. Now, our next guest, coming to us from North Carolina, is Badass Sue McIntyre.
All my life, I've always known that I could handle just about anything that came my way. I knew I was smart and competent. a real hotshot. That is, up until one night in Armenia, when all that changed, and almost changed my life for good. In 1992, I was living there and working for an international humanitarian organization. That's what I do. I'm a disaster response specialist. I've worked in places that's on no one's bucket list and loved every moment. I was sharing an apartment with one of my coworkers, Ray, when we had just sat down for an evening meal that included a package of goodies from Ray's wife in the States. One of the items was Nutella, which I'd never had before. He raved about it, saying how delicious it was. And just as I was about to taste it, there came a knock at the door. Ray got up to go answer it, and within seconds, I became aware we were having a home invasion. I heard Ray bang against the wall and fall to the floor. I became aware we were in real danger. So I took a knife from the kitchen table and went out into the hall, where I found Ray stabbed and bleeding profusely on the floor. Though I saw no one there, I did not know if the intruder had gone into another room. So I grabbed Ray and managed to drag him back to the kitchen, where I secured the kitchen door. He was still conscious, so I asked him, "Is the intruder still here?" He shook his head no. So I picked up the knife again and I went back out into the hallway. I did a cursory check of the other rooms. Then I bolted the front door. I hastened back to Ray and began to administer first aid, make an emergency call for help, and apply pressure for the wound. Through it all, I remained calm and attentive to every detail, all the while aware I was in a foreign land, alone. Eventually, help came. We medevaced him home and me shortly thereafter. And I thought that was that. But the Nutella, that seemingly innocuous item, got planted in my brain as the activating point of the horror of that night, triggering panic attacks, which I had never had before. I always thought I did not have a nerve in my body. So I became driven to study more about it. I knew that if I wanted to go back into the field and get my life back, I needed to work on myself. Here's how post-traumatic stress works. You don't have to actually see the item. It just has to come into your mind. Believe me, there were times when I was pretty sure the only nut Nutella was me. Through discipline, I desensitized myself so that the fear and the trauma of that night faded. Nonetheless, still, when I see Nutella, my first reaction is to be back in the apartment and in that night. I'm lucky I was able to identify what caused the change in me and recover my usual cocky self and go on doing what I was born to do. As for COVID, I take all the necessary precautions, and I will get through this just fine. Having to restrict my traveling has led to something new, another change. I've discovered I can paint.
Some experts are warning of a looming mental health crisis in the wake of the pandemic and a serious increase of post-traumatic stress disorder. Another school of thought is that the potential for post-traumatic growth is equally possible. This pandemic, which is the largest global disruption since World War II, has led to serious increases in depression, suicide, and especially for some on the front lines, post-traumatic stress disorder. People respond to stress differently. There is what psychologists call post-traumatic growth and can only occur when the crisis is over. Post-traumatic growth can lead to a new spiritual awakening process, a deeper appreciation of life, and awareness of its possibilities. The psychiatrist Viktor Frankl, in his book Man's Search for Meaning, wrote people are able to thrive after trauma when they find or impose meaning on what occurred. Sue beat PTSD, and as her artwork shows, she found growth too.
Our next badass coming to you from Miami is Maybellinis Alvarez.
Cooking has never been my thing. I'd rather eat street food 7 nights a week than face a stove. But lucky me, my significant other could be a professional chef. If I've opened these cabinets, you see a lot of fancy cookware. You see this kitchen? It's his domain. That's till COVID. I'm gonna let you in on a little secret. I am a master at dress for less. I know where to get the best looking knockoffs that the Chinese market produces and are rock bottom prices. I'm also highly competitive, so my thing was to invite friends over for dinner that he make me dressed to the nines in my below bargain basement tags that everyone would ooh and ah over. So comes the virus, no parties, no shopping. What do I do with my bloodthirsty need to compete? I'm a hairdresser, and we were in total lockdown during March, April, and most of May. I challenged my sweetheart to a cook-off using the fewest ingredients. He laughed. The idea that I could cook anything, let alone challenge the master chef, was a change too far-fetched to imagine. Guess what? I didn't win, but it did change the way I look at pots and pans. And though we were only 2 in this contest, and I came in second, but it was with honors. Here's my dish. Who says a leopard can change his spots? Try it. You will love it, and I've only just begun.
The uncertain times we are living in is a petri dish for anxiety. How do we tamp it down and keep thriving? Advice from the mental health community is that we figure out what we can control right now and invest our energy in that direction. May is a perfect example. When she took on a new challenge and mastered it, she regained her sense of empowerment. It's human nature to want to feel a sense of control over life, and learning something new gives us that confidence. There's not a skill that you can think of that the internet doesn't have a tutorial on. All you have to do is look. How do you think I figured out how to do our show from home? Our next badass is the renowned Shakespearean actress Debra Byrd, but before I let her captivate you with her personal story, I thought you'd enjoy hearing her tell us what it took as an artist of color to be successful performing Shakespeare.
I was told that because I had such a proficiency for language, perhaps I should try my hand at August Wilson, and that maybe the classics wasn't quite the route I should go, you know, being an artist of color and all. It was devastating. How do we change people saying that? And so that's when we formed Take Wing and Soar Productions to make sure that classically trained actors of color graduating with BFAs and MFAs, spending $60,000, $100,000, $200,000 will have a place to come, a safe space. What it takes to be a great Shakespearean is practice and practice and more practice and more practice. But before you can practice and practice, you need to study and study and learn. So you should definitely take some formal training because it involves the entire body. So that means you need movement classes, you need speech and voice classes, as well as regular acting classes. You need to take all of those things, and then you need to get the text and practice. But of course, you have to learn the little clues, the ones you find in the folio, the ones you find by marking up your script with the Z's and the TH's and the linkings and all those things. But for me, it's practice. I was about 14 years old when I made my first major change. I desperately wanted to change my condition and change my circumstances. Well, I never was really trying to make it out of the hood. I was simply trying to make it out of a hopeless and helpless situation. Let me take you back a bit. When I was 9 or 10 years old, my broken-hearted mom was no longer available to me, and my home fell into major disrepair. On occasion, there wasn't hardly any food in the house, and I remember searching for food in every cupboard with no luck. And I decided that I was going to my grandma's house. I mean, I couldn't really just ask a neighbor. That would have been just too embarrassing. So I, with my little skinny legs, would walk for blocks and blocks down what seemed to me to be a never-ending streets. It was just 2 blocks down and 7 avenues across, but wow, it was exhausting. And taking those long walks across town from east to west, sometimes that frightened me. But I was hungry. And hungry as I was determined to make it to Grandma's. At Grandma's, I could expect quiet, a feeling of comfort, the AM radio, my cousin Jackie, and a hot meal. Sometimes I would stay the weekend. Other times I would pick up some canned goods and travel back a long walk to 2nd Avenue. And when I would stay at Grandma's house, I remember learning them songs on the 1600 AM station. The devil went down to Georgia. He was looking for a soul steal. He was in the bind because he was behind. He was willing to make a deal. I'm a silly goose, but that was my favorite song. And when I think about it, it was for me a song of triumph over the enemy that came to steal, kill, and destroy. Yet it was fun and funny, but life was not a laughing matter. And I eventually left home and moved in with Grandma. Still, even that proved the challenge. And there I was, now at 16, changing addresses again. In fact, I changed addresses so many times that I had lived in 20 different locations by the time I was 25 years old. And I wasn't an army brat either. I guess like Dorothy in The Wiz, I wanted desperately to find my way home. But where was that? And recently, when the pandemic struck and people were told to stay home, I found myself far, far, far away from my regular home. But unlike the child I once was, I wasn't scared. And I wasn't hungry. And I didn't feel lost. In fact, a wonderful change has come over me. And I realize that I am at home anywhere that I find peace. And I can find peace in a quiet room with no TV and no radio, just me, a grown-ass woman, alone with my thoughts and my dreams and my courage. Courage to forge my own path and to face head-on whatever comes my way. Blessed. No, better than blessed. Thank you, Lord.
Debra Ann is a remarkable woman whose self-discipline is due entirely to her own will. She has made certain choices. She said it loud and clear. Practice, practice, and more of the same. The world told her that as a Black woman, she had no business thinking that Shakespeare could be her forte. She's proved them wrong. In the Bible, Hebrews 12, verse 11, tells us that discipline yields the fruit of peace and righteousness to those who have been trained by it. Discipline, whether it's God's or our own, it does something significant to us. It changes us for the better.
Maria, my love, you are exactly right. Let's take a look at what the badass trait is that all our guests have in common. And it's an old-fashioned word. It's called grit. Big things can throw us for a loop. The loss of a job, a serious health scare, an injury, the end of a love affair, or like what happened to me, the death of my husband. And of course, this pandemic. Grit is the mental toughness and the spirit that propels you forward. It's the key to remaining disciplined and motivated, and rather than courage or exceptional talent, grit is the tenacity, the perseverance, the resilience, and willingness to keep going despite obstacles and to adapt to your circumstances. And knowing that even if you can't see the light at the end of the tunnel, you will light that sucker up.
Here's one badass signing off to another.
There'll be some changes made. But before we do, remember, we are on at 7:30, the last Tuesday of every month. So take it away, Judy.
Change in the weather, a change in the sea. From now on, there'll be a change in me. My walk will be different, my talk and my name. Nothing about me is gonna be the same. I'm gonna change my way of living. If that ain't enough, I'll change the way that I strut my stuff. 'Cause nobody wants you when you're old and gray.